All right. Firstly, then, to get us warmed up and to get the question out of the way, Katy, where in the world are you?
Oh, yes. So I'm in, it's actually sunny Devon today. Yeah, I'm in sunny Devon, southwest, quite near the beach. So it's quite nice.
Oh, lovely. I'm heading sort of going through on my way to Cornwall, providing I can get fuel, obviously.
Yes.
On Friday. So, yeah, I'm kind of like trying not to think too much about that at the moment. But yes, I'm passing through next week, actually, on Friday. So,
oh, how lovely.
Coming down for a bit. So, yeah.
Welcome to the Full Stop Podcast with your hosts, Berenice Smith, Sarah Lawrence, and me, Michael Hughes. Now, if this is your first time here, our podcast is centred around supporting the childless, not by choice community. And our aim is to be a focal point for the community and with all our special guests, show you how to manage your grief and give a voice to the issues specific to us. And by example, show that a full and happy life can be had without those children we dearly wanted. The inclusion issue of childlessness and the workplace is starting to become more visible. And this episode, we were thrilled to talk to Katy Schnitzler, the founder of MIST Workshops. Now, they are a training company helping organisations to better support employees experiencing the prevalent yet taboo issues of miscarriage, infertility and childlessness. And they provide workshops and policy writing to promote a whole organisational approach. So let's meet Katy and find out what she gets up to. For our listeners, Katy, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you so much for having me, first and foremost. I'm honoured to be here to speak about the work that I do. So my name's Katy and I run a training company called MIST Workshops. What I do with MIST is we actually go in and we help organisations to recognise reproductive taboos, mainly. So pregnancy loss being one, also infertility, and also obviously childlessness as well. So what we do is we offer training to organisations to really help to raise awareness of the issues that people are facing, because, you know, these issues are so pervasive, yet they feel like they're so rare because of the taboos attached to them. So as you're probably aware, so obviously it's 1 in 4, pregnancies end in loss. They actually think that could be higher, because these are just the ones that are clinically recorded. And then couples going through infertility. Some statistics show it's 1 in 8 couples, some show 1 in 6. We really don't know the full amount, really, again, because it's based on, people who are actually seeking treatment. Childlessness, as you know, 1 in 5. Unfortunately, the stats, there aren't many on men. But it's estimated 1 in 5 women are childless not through choice, 1 in 5 are childless, but 90% of them are childless not by choice. So this is a huge issue, and we're there to try and tackle the stigma and to raise awareness of how many people this is actually affecting, and raising awareness about the triggers, really, that people are facing every day in the workplace. What we find is, unfortunately, society is very pronatal. There's an expectation that everybody who wants children can just have them, just like that. As soon as they start trying, everything's going to go smoothly. And unfortunately, this is reinforced by film and media and everything else. Really, we offer training for companies, but we also do policy writing and policy reviewing. And just more recently, we started doing research for companies as well. So companies that want to find out what is actually happening in their place of work, how are people experiencing these issues, just so that they can see, the unique ways that perhaps we can work with them to bring them to light and to help so that they don't lose talent.
So how do you get your foot in the door to these places? Is it are you invited, or do you go on the offensive and go, excuse me, there's something here you need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so we've run some webinars, and we've had quite a lot of interest through that. So, when it's Baby Loss Awareness Week, for example, and obviously World Childless Week, we try and use those platforms to raise awareness about what we do. And it's been really well received by many organisations. Unfortunately, there is an issue with the fact that some of these things are still minimised. I don't think some managers really realise the extent of how, these things are impacting on their employees, mainly because their employees are silenced. So many people are going through these issues, but they feel unable to actually speak out. And one of the reasons is because there isn't, transparent policies on these issues. So it creates even more of a silence. People aren't aware of their entitlement to leave, for example. There's so many things, but so we've kind of then, through word of mouth, so when we've worked with an organisation, they've then told other organisations about what we do. Unfortunately, some companies want a more off-the-shelf kind of approach, so they want us to just write a policy for them and then say, right, we've got this policy now, great. But what we find is actually we need to train HR and train managers and actually take a more organisational wide approach to actually tackle the kind of pronatal, like the things that are more subtle, that people might not realise that they're triggering, but just things like when people say, oh, I'm going to have the day off to go to my child's nativity play, and they might speak about that in the office in front of everybody. And they might just not realise, because they might think, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't have children, but, oh, that must be a choice, it's really educating like the whole workforce, really.
I guess it's like a hands-off kind of attitude I can see coming through there, that if you write it for them, then they don't have to actually kind of perhaps read it until maybe they need to read it, and therefore they're not necessarily engaging with the words in the way that you might they've had a conversation with you about it or been a bigger part of instigating it, perhaps. Is that kind of how you see that sometimes?
Absolutely. So we don't actually sell, just an off-the-shelf policy that people can adopt, because we don't believe that it's an effective way to, it just kind of feels like just ticking that box, really. So it's more about educating about the implicit ways as well. So not just changing policy, because anyone can have a policy, it's written in black and white, and yeah, great, but it doesn't mean it's being enforced. So that's something that we feel very passionate about, having the training alongside the policies as well. And then also rewriting existing policies, because often, family-friendly policies, for example, we need to make sure that people with children are not having unfair privilege, having more flexible working, having more options for part-time home working. This is what we're coming up against a lot. And people who don't have children are feeling like, well, I don't have a reason to ask to go part-time, because I'm not a mum. And it's really like, it's heartbreaking when you hear, of people how they feel that. And it's actually, it does create this divide. And some of it is unintentional, because in pushing this family narrative all the time, we are excluding. And I just don't think that organisations are noticing how they might be creating disparities.
I'm curious. So obviously policy is great, as you say, but you don't want it to be a tick box. How do you get that change of culture? Because that would be a massive shift, wouldn't it? As you say, it's quite family-centric, pronatalist. How do you get that shift?
Yeah, so we do provide training workshops, and we promote that we do that across the organisation. So not just with HR and not just with managers, because changing the culture is so difficult in an organisation, but especially when, you know, the workplace echoes kind of societal values, doesn't it? So the fact that we expect all people to become parents and we celebrate it. And when people aren't mums and dads, you know, there's this narrative around, oh, you know, because they must be cold, or, oh, they're career driven, or, you know, whatever other stereotypes there are. So, yeah, we really feel that it's educating about the more implicit ways that we're pronatal. So, for example, one thing we've come up against is baby showers happening in the workplace, for example. Now, that might seem like a really positive thing to do for somebody, but actually it's very triggering for many people, you know, so it's actually trying to show that you can celebrate somebody's news, but you need to be mindful of how that can actually not be appropriate in a workplace, you know, taking that outside of a workplace, making it optional. But because of the pandemic and, you know, people doing things on Zoom and Teams, there have been issues that we found where people are having baby showers online during the work time. And it's kind of like, how do you get out of that without making it so obvious that you're struggling? And people don't want to admit that they're struggling with trying to conceive, or that they've had a loss, because they're fearful of discrimination. You know, they're fearful of reprimands. If they think, oh, I can't tell my manager because they'll know that I'm trying for a baby, so then I won't get made permanent, or I might be at risk of redundancy. And, you know, it's trying to really raise awareness that actually organisations are going to lose out, rather than, you know, it being one-sided and just the employee leaving. It's actually going to affect the organisation as well, because this isn't just happening to, you know, one person. This is, you know, a large issue.
It's huge, isn't it? I remember, we'll have to put a trigger warning on this one, Berenice, but I remember, you know, that superstition that you don't tell anybody that you're pregnant for the first 3 months, and then obviously the flip side to that is you can't tell anybody if you've had a loss. I found that really difficult to deal with. I had a male manager who had children, and there were people on the team who were young, who were falling pregnant. I was like, trigger. It makes that so difficult to manage, doesn't it? So it's not just cultural change. There's a whole, as you say, like a microcosm of bigger society around the superstitions that we have to adhere to. That takes a lot of work, doesn't it, to not fix it, you know what I mean, address.
Yeah, we do come across this with because workplaces, you know, historically are more kind of male dominated, and they're more based on like the male body norm. So pregnancy has been hidden from workplaces for a long time, because it's kind of like, you know, you don't want to seem that you're not reliable. You don't want to seem that, oh, my career's coming second now. You know, there's so much to this, isn't there? But definitely that hiding, that 12-week rule, is so difficult, because then you're announcing, okay, I was pregnant, but I'm not anymore. And it's all in one go almost, isn't it? And also the feeling that when you get to 12 weeks, oh, I'm safe now and I can tell everybody. So then if you have a later loss or a stillbirth, you know, you feel like, oh my goodness, everybody in my workplace knows now I was pregnant, and I have to go back. I'd love to use work as a distraction to restore and to focus on something else, but I can't, because everybody's aware now of what's happened to me. They're treating me differently.
Yeah, I've been through that when I went through the last IVF, and people had to know about it because I had to leave at certain times. I spoke about it briefly in the webinar that we did with World Childless Week, but people knew because I had to get on the train. And then a colleague kicked up a fuss because I was leaving earlier on a Friday, simply because I was exhausted. And and she wanted the same treatment as a mother. And I just can remember just thinking, I'll have to just say, and it was odd. People's actual reactions to going through IVF was strange. Some people just didn't quite know what to say, and they were parents, but they'd had their children naturally, but just didn't know what to say. And then I found that people got really hopeful on my behalf. And the worst part for me, one of the worst parts, I think, there's lots of worst parts to it all, but one of the big overriding worries I had was actually going back.
Yeah.
To the point where I thought, I don't know if I want to go back. And then when I finally got made redundant, along with heaps of other colleagues, in a way, it was actually a relief. But it was a different relief. So we were going through the whole redundancy thing, and we had to work 3 months or whenever we just chose to leave, but it was at least 3 months. And sat there thinking, actually, this is just such a relief, thank God, because I can get out. And I'll get some money for getting out, because actually I got redundancy pay. Oh my God, it was odd time, because my attitude towards it was slightly different. But yeah, this odd kind of thing where we're sat and it's so visible. You're at your desk and you've got your colleagues all around you, and it's like a fishbowl. And somehow or another, whatever you're going through, and I've been in situations even whilst we've been presenting the podcast, and I think, oh well, I'm talking, therefore I'm getting a little bit better. But I've been in situations where I've been triggered still, and someone has said to me, but I thought you were over that.
Absolutely. I don't think people realise it's a grief.
Yeah, and it's lifelong. I think whatever situation that you're in, whether it's by circumstance, whether it's because of medical, physical, it's a lifelong grief. It doesn't go away. It will always be there. You just have different days and different ways of dealing with it, but it's permanent. It's what Jodie calls the disenfranchised grief.
Yes, absolutely. It's a grief you just can't speak out about. And if you do, you know, it might be minimized. You know, oh, well, at least, I mean, some of the things you hear, oh, at least you can still have a drink. At least you can have a lie-in.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, I mean, it is unbelievable, really. And then you think, goodness, you know, actually how grief affects you, and people assuming that you're able to have a lie-in and you're really enjoying, you know, your life. And
I got told I could sleep through the night.
Or
sleep through the night. And I just remember saying, well, when you're woken up by a child. I'm woken up by nightmares.
Yeah.
I'm woken up by grief, by loss, by absolute overwhelming. 2 in the morning, there is not a single person out there who feels the way that I do. At least you can go online to Mumsnet and you can talk about it with somebody, and you will have a whole avalanche of people going, yeah, I know. What have I got at 2 in the morning, really? I mean, luckily there are things now, but I remember at the time thinking there was absolutely nothing out there. But then again, you get accused of being bitchy and angry, don't you? You know, so whatever you would say, you know, you're damned either way, and we're allowed to be angry about it. But it's inappropriate for the workplace.
Yeah, you know, it's so true. And I found it interesting what you said about when you said that you're having fertility treatment and people getting hopeful is one of the things that we're finding. And it's because I think often in the media, it's portrayed that when you have fertility treatment, oh, it's all going to work. It's all going to be great. Yes, it's expensive, but oh, well, you're going to get a baby at the end of it. And actually, failure rate, 75% failure rate.
Yeah, it's something like 72, 75, 76, something like that. It's in the 70s. And that always pulls people up sharp if you say it. Every single time I've said it, there is an audible intake of breath, because you only hear the good stuff. But actually, sometimes the good stuff is actually to talk about the losses. That's the good stuff. It's the painful stuff. It's the crap stuff, but it's the good stuff because it will make one other person feel less lonely.
So true. So true. And another thing we come up against is people, with the sense of failure and the shame of saying that actually I wanted children, but I couldn't, and going into the reasons is very triggering often. But what we find is some people will say, oh, I just tell people I just didn't want children because it's too painful for me to open those wounds. And of course, that then it kind of reinforces the taboo of it, doesn't it? And you can understand why people don't want to talk about it, of course. But then it kind of reinforces the idea that pregnancy is controllable, and oh look, they only don't have children because they didn't want them, but I think the other thing you were saying as well is, it's a lifelong grief. It's so true, and it can catch you out of the blue. So you might be having a really nice week, you might feel I'm making progress, I'm feeling like, I've been really distracted, work's been good, whatever, I've met friends, it's been great. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, someone will say to you, oh, so do you have children? And it's that stab to the heart. It's like, oh, and I don't think people realize, and this is another thing that we're trying to inform, especially colleagues of, because people mean well, they might be trying to make conversation with you, but it's that assumption that, everybody has children, everybody can have children. And it's so triggering, not just people who, perhaps that they're older and they don't have children, maybe they've gone through the grief and they feel they've accepted. But this can be for people who are trying to conceive, or people that have illnesses that mean that they can't have children. It can just be so triggering.
I found it a lot in networking groups as well, where people just, you go to kind of like shindig things and people just say, oh, well, children, they assume that you have. There was a day that I paid a ticket to this Freelance Heroes Day, and it was about 2 years ago, and I'd paid money for this, and all of the people presenting on these in the morning had said, I'm a mum, or I'm dad too, and they all talked about their family stuff, and then we're into the training. And then the third speaker announced, oh, well, when we've got some great news, my wife's pregnant. Oh. That was by lunchtime. And I thought, no, I know I've paid money for this. I know I can learn stuff, but no, actually, no, because I don't know what the afternoon is going to bring. My bucket is now too full. Yeah. I can't do this anymore. And so I left. And I've actually naturally now migrated to groups where I know that it's slightly more diverse, or actually that the people running it, I know aren't parents, or at least are open-minded to listen. In fact, actually, one of the groups that I belong to is actually very good. It's not completely free from triggers, but actually I have a safe space to say, or it's too much, or that if I don't turn up that day, and actually I know that actively the person that runs the group is listening to the podcast, is listening to what I'm talking about, and is aware of that. And a few people within that are too, who are themselves parents, which is incredibly gratifying. But it's taken me to go beyond the statement, I don't have children, to say something else in order to probably open up those conversations. So regardless, I've had to say I hate calling it a weakness, because it isn't, because all the people I meet through the podcast and all the stuff we do is so absolutely stronger than so many. They really, really are. All of our guests are, all of you are. But it's what other people perceive to be a weakness.
Absolutely. Just like not the norm.
Yeah. You're different. You tried something and you failed, or maybe you didn't even try. Maybe you didn't even try hard enough.
Yeah, try hard enough.
Yeah. Here's some fixes for you, because in the business community, everyone is used to problems and offering solutions. It's indoctrinated into you, I think, as an employee and a business owner, that you have a problem and you fix it. And therefore, I think, in fairness to people and to colleagues who perhaps choose to be child-free or are parents, they probably are used to that. It's what they're used to, because that's what we do. Yeah,
absolutely. And one thing that we've found is that often people will leave their jobs because it might be the nature of the work they do. So it might be that they just don't have capacity, if they're doing a job that's quite mentally demanding or emotionally demanding. So recently I spoke to a lady. She's actually a midwife, and she's had losses, and she's it's assumed that she has children because she's a midwife. Same with primary teachers. It just, people leaving careers that they've worked really hard to go into and they're really good at, but just those kind of triggers. Sometimes working with pregnant women, so people working in HR, but they know that they have to work, and advise people who are pregnant, people who are parents, and sometimes just picking up more slack because they don't have children. One woman I spoke to, she's a lecturer, and one of her students said, "Oh, like, you're so successful, you've got this amazing career, you've got these publications. Oh yeah, so do you have children as well?" And she turned around and said, no, I don't. Massive trigger, in front of a whole class, lecture hall. And the student kind of put a hand on the desk, hit the desk and said, "Oh, that explains it then. That explains why you're so successful, because, you don't have any children to see to." And it was just, to hear it and everything that she'd been through, and wanted children as well as her career, but, was struggling. It's just so rife, that you can just have children when you want, it's just as easy as that. And I guess as well with social media now as well, so often you see perfect pregnancy bumps, celebrities posting. We have seen more and more disclosures of loss in recent times, I've noticed, the last couple of years, which I think has been really positive. So notably, Meghan Markle spoke about her loss, didn't she? And some other celebrities.
My cousin, Rebel Wilson.
Oh, yeah. Did she speak about...
Your cousin, Rebel Wilson?
Well, very, very distant. Very distant. See, this is what the DNA thing will get you, Sarah. I'm convinced that Sarah do DNA test. But get back to what we were talking about. She came out and said that one of the reasons she lost weight was because to increase her chance of trying to get pregnant, because she knows that she has issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really brave to speak out, I think, and it gives other people a platform. And it normalizes it, doesn't it? And this is part of the work we want to do, is really making sure that, miscarriage and infertility, childlessness is actually, it becomes normalized, because these issues are affecting so many people.
Most definitely. Amy Schumer is another one. I think I read somewhere that she did have a successful IVF, but she did say that, "I'm never doing that again." Yeah. What that did to me, absolutely, I just can't go through that again. So although she was successful, it does, it is quite poignant in terms of, what IVF does to a woman. I mean, I'm talking to the converted, but yeah.
What about the issues though? So obviously not everyone does IVF. Some people are obviously childless by circumstance. So how do you raise awareness around those issues? Because that's even less obvious, isn't it, than IVF and things like that?
And it can be, I think that's a really good point, because you kind of have that double whammy, don't you? We were speaking earlier about if you don't have a partner and you also don't have children, there's so much stigma around that and stereotypes, you know, about, oh, why are they single? You know, why did they never get married? And yeah, absolutely. And there's so many reasons for being childless, you know, as opposed to being child free where you've chosen. And yeah, it might be that you never met a suitable partner, or you met your partner too late. You know, so many other financial reasons. So yeah, I mean, we really, because although obviously you might be childless due to loss, infertility, obviously, as you know, and I know that you talk about this, you can be childless for many other reasons, and we are trying to raise awareness of those reasons as well, sort of more social factors. And actually, it's kind of made quite impossible sometimes for people to have children or try for children young because, you know, of the pushing of careers and getting a house and stigma around being an unmarried parent. And, you know, it still exists, even though we think we've moved so far forward, don't we? But there's so much stigma, but absolutely. So we actually separate and make sure that employers are aware. So childlessness, we have a complete kind of a separate section on it because we believe that it can tie in with, obviously someone might have losses or they might have infertility and then resulting childlessness. But like you say, there can be other reasons and they can be just as triggered, you know, and I think that this is often overlooked actually. Because you might speak to people and they sort of say, oh, well, I would have really liked to try for children. But, you know, my marriage broke down before I had that opportunity. And then I just never met anyone else. Or, you know, I think it's really crucial to raise awareness about that.
Yeah, it ties in with that cultural piece, doesn't it? Because that assumption that if you don't have children, you've got all this extra time and capacity to take on all this extra work. It was the questions we got during the webinar we did a couple of weeks ago for World Childless Week was, there's this presumption that I'll take on this extra work, there's this presumption that I'll do the extra hours, there's this presumption that I won't need holiday. And it's kind of all those unsaids, isn't it, that are tied up in that cultural, you know, piece that actually get missed time and time again because it's just, oh, well, it'll be all right, Sarah will do it, Sarah hasn't got kids. You know what I mean? I experienced that a lot. You'll be all right. You won't want Christmas off, will you?
Yes, that's such a good example. Christmas, you know, oh, well, so-and-so has children, so they shouldn't work on Christmas Eve, you know, Christmas Day, whatever. We did have, so one man spoke to us actually about how he was told, oh, can you do that open evening? Because, you know, I've got children, I need to put them to bed and you don't have children. And actually, no one knew his circumstances. You know, that he was very, he was in his 30s, but he was feeling very, you know, he hadn't met a partner yet and he really wanted to have children. And that trigger and the discrimination of taking on more. You know, often so evenings, weekends, and like you were saying, Christmas, holiday, Easter, whatever it is. And it's kind of like having that privilege because you're a parent, you know, is creating this disparity, this real unfairness, which I don't think many organisations really acknowledge.
No, I've got a story where I used to work in a very male-dominated environment, and Christmas was the prize, and so we had to actually work at a roster so that, you know, so many got Christmas off, so to make it fair. Yeah. I remember someone saying to me, "Oh, you haven't got kids? Can I swap with you?" And the language, we don't. How can I put this? It was quite an animated discussion, but the end result was no, because I deserve a Christmas off too. So you can imagine, put some choice words at the end of that, and that was what it was. That's how it ended up.
It's really good that you felt able to challenge that, because that takes a lot of bravery, I think, because you have to then put yourself in a vulnerable position to say, that. Well,
yeah, I understand that, and I guess from my point of view, it was a little bit different because, so I want to sort of say this as a bit of a different behaviour to think about. At work, everyone knew my and Vicky's position. Everyone. Because I made sure I talked about it, and so that going through the IVF process, you have to nip off home at certain, at that specific time. Yeah. So I just felt, well, look, I have this attitude, rather than keep things hidden, bring them out, because then there's no ammunition. It's almost like there's no ammunition for people to hurt you. Yeah. So and so that allowed me then to have that courage to just go, good job, no one can see this, but but that gave me the chance to do that. So but I totally understand it. It can be an absolute, no, I can't do that. I just couldn't say that to anyone.
It's really good, really, really good to challenge, and we do find that often people say, "Oh, well, I can't say, oh, that's not fair," because then I have to kind of admit that I'm struggling, or and I think it's really difficult, because some people, maybe they feel like it might make them vulnerable. It might make them in a position where, then I have to tell people, and then their employer might assume, oh, they're going to try for a baby. Oh, let's not promote them.
I guess that must also be a difference between males and females as well, where, there's still that, what we talked about earlier, oh,
absolutely,
we're going to get pregnant. Oh, hang on. Well, what are we going to do with her?
Yeah.
Because she'll be going on maternity leave.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to say that we do really push for, actually, is to include partners within policies and with, when we're doing the training, because partners are so often overlooked, that they're going through a grief as well. Dr. Robin Hadley, I think you might have spoken about him in your last podcast. Fantastic work he does, along with Jodie Day as well. But he was really talking about how actually there's this assumption that men don't get broody. It's only women that really want to be a mum. And so we're really kind of trying to raise awareness again about partners and the fact that they go through a grief, and they're not in a support role, or well, they might be practically or whatever, but they shouldn't be. They also need time off. They also need to grieve.
Most definitely. I mean, I can't talk in detail about some of the discussions in the Clan of Brothers. So that's the male support group that Andy Harrod and I started for childless men.
Yes. I saw that.
And a lot of the discussion in there is obviously around our grief. You see it is the biggest thing that gets talked about in that group is the male grief, one not recognised, but also the fact that they're not quite sure how to express it either. So it can come across as quite as anger at times, so that can be misunderstood in workplaces. I actually said, I had a discussion with a woman in Canada who wanted to bring this to her workplace, and interviewed me as a man who's childless and prepared to talk about it. And I said, look, one of the things is that, a childless man could be the person who's always up in front of HR because he's got an anger issue. But it's actually, but it's the only way that he can express this grief that he's feeling, because we are not, we're not sophisticated in that. We're not, as men, we're not that able to express emotion and have a vocabulary around it. So,
absolutely,
totally agree.
Yeah, and
that was a long-winded way, but yeah,
no,
totally
it's great. And I saw that you set that up, and I think that's so positive, because we speak to a lot of men who say, I just don't have an outlet, and I just feel like I have to be strong for my partner. She's the one that's gone through this grueling IVF. What have I been through? And actually it's trying to educate that, whoa, hold on, no, you've been there, and you've had to hide and be the strong person for both of you, and that's exhausting. And so we really want to help organizations to include partners, whether they're male or female partners, but to really recognize that there's a grief there as well, and even more so in a way that they might not have the network to kind of to process it, because they might not be able to talk to anybody.
So what's the hardest thing about your job when you're making these policies or developing policies for other companies? What's the real thing that you've got to get through? What's that nut that you've really got to crack before?
Okay, so it's quite hard. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about cultural change is difficult, because obviously it's Shine, isn't it, that talks about the different like the core, and getting down to that core layer is really difficult. Sometimes we find that HR, they just want to quickly put a policy in place to almost tick a box, and it might be that person in HR, they have children, and they might be very open about that, and they might be very open, I never struggled, so it can be really difficult to try to raise awareness about issues that perhaps some people may think, oh, well, that's not really affecting anyone in our workplace. That's not happening very often. What's the point in this? They don't recognize.
Actually, that's a very good point. For World Childless Week, I put on to my work's website that this is World Childless Week, and I shared my story and why I am putting this on here. And I also gave a few examples of why it's important to recognise childless people in the workplace. Things like pregnancy announcements in the office.
Yeah.
So, can think back. Did you ever notice someone excuse themselves when there was a pregnancy announcement? Because that'll be the person in the bathroom or the stairwell probably letting go of their grief.
Yeah.
The other example was family photo walls. Imagine you're childless, and that is a thing you walk past every single day of your working life. Now, it's quite interesting how I got extreme amount of personal messages about that, because women who were parents but saying, I never even thought. I never even thought about that. But also from a lot of other women that just said, thank you for bringing this up, because I couldn't do that. I am one of those women, and I couldn't bring it up.
Oh, wow.
So, there were some tears. There were some tears when I was reading some of those messages. But you're right. It is that some people just do not even see it. And it would be so hard to change their minds.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we come up against, so when you're trying to raise awareness about the issues, they might say, oh, yeah, I know someone who had a miscarriage. Oh, but they've got a kid now and they're fine. Yeah. And you kind of think, oh, hold on a minute. So often people bring their own experiences. And if they haven't been through this, it can be very hard, because they don't even realize that some of their own friends, family members even, are going through this. You know what I mean? Because people feel such shame and such stigma about disclosing. So we do come across that, and often people they want a quick fix, and we're there to explain that actually this is something that, this is going to take time, and it needs to be an organisational approach. So we need to be able to explain to colleagues why it's not appropriate to send a picture of a scan in an email across a whole department. Why that's not actually okay. And
because I can imagine if it comes from the top, then of course it's here is why we're not doing this. But if it was to come from an individual, that would be, who's that bitter and twisted person? I'm happy that I've got a scan.
Absolutely. And then it puts you in that vulnerable position, doesn't it? If you're the person that goes to HR, and then you're admitting to HR, and I mean, we have found issues with some, one example was an HR practitioner who, during the lockdown, actually sent an email to everyone, every staff member, and said, I don't know how you parents are doing it. I just cannot imagine what you're going through. I don't have children, and I just think, wow, I take my hat off to you. And to receive that email when, we were saying earlier, you've had your fertility treatment postponed. We've spoken to a lot of couples who had that happen. Maybe they were going abroad for their last possible chance, and dealing with that grief in lockdown. And then you've got people living on their own, childless, again, as we mentioned. And I just think that I think Jodie Day calls it a blind spot. And what we want to really do is to educate organisation-wide about these issues and about pronatal behaviours. Always talking about families, this idea that families involve, two parents who live together, man and a woman, with two kids, and we really need to change these narratives and to try and challenge, that this isn't actually the norm for many people. There's so many diverse families. I'm still calling them families because I think people feel, I can't say about my family because I don't have children. But my family to me is my, maybe my mum and my sister and I don't know, my friends. And they don't feel that they can use that word family if they live on their own. Quite interesting.
I love that. I'm curious. I've been sitting here listening to us all talking, and there was a comment that we had again in that webinar about the kind of the them and an us, the them versus us.
Yeah.
So we talk about pronatalism, and obviously we're trying to change perspectives. How do we get away from that? Because obviously, if somebody does raise there were some really good points about maternity and paternity leave and the fact that we don't get that. And there were also some comments about, well, if I want Christmas, I can't ask for that individually because that sounds bitter, or it sounds like I'm just trying to be awkward. I wonder how we work around that. Have you had any experience or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so we try to, for example, if you've got family-friendly policies, for example, they're quite common because obviously employers wanted to show that actually we're doing this for mostly women, wasn't it? It was on their sort of gender equality agenda almost. So they wanted to address mothers. So often you've got these family-friendly policies where it's like, okay, if you have children, these are the benefits that we offer, childcare vouchers, flexi working, home working, whatever. And it's trying to make sure that actually we reword these policies, that this is for everyone. You don't have to bring a reason. You don't have to be a parent to have this. Everybody is entitled to these privileges. And what we are trying to avoid creating is this divide and trying to really, because actually some people who are parents have actually gone through these struggles as well. And some people we've spoken to, they might have had a child, but they're still triggered by pregnancy announcements. They're still triggered by scanned photos. It's actually amazing because they, something like 1 in 6 women get post-traumatic stress after a loss. It's really, really high. And then obviously that's triggered by being around babies, prams, scans, all sorts. So yeah, really what we want to do is tackle this language that could be creating a divide, and really making sure that these policies are inclusive and the way that we speak is inclusive. We're not segregating, oh, you parents, you know, and always talking about family as if it involves, you know, having children. So that's what we're really trying to tackle. It's hard. It's really hard. But what we do is we bring real life examples that we've got permission to use that have been anonymized, of course. But we try and use that so that we can show managers, HR, but also colleagues, you know, where these triggers are happening and how they can avoid, you know, accidentally doing it. So, you know, bringing a baby into work might sound like a lovely thing, but my goodness, the amount of times that comes up. So I should have also mentioned I'm doing a PhD on the topic as well. So a lot of the work that I do with my business MIST is informed by the research. Not just research I'm doing, but, you know, the literature that's out there. Fortunately, there's not a lot because it's such a taboo. But yeah, so really trying to raise awareness of like the effects of these things, the effects of having baby showers in the workplace, you know, like you were saying, that board, my goodness, having a board that's so visual that you're walking past. I mean, we often find now that people will announce in a newsletter or they'll email a whole department, you know, their news. And we're trying to inform organisations why this is very triggering and how they can actually manage this. You know, so perhaps having something that you sign up to if you want to receive those emails or that newsletter. However, then this can create it's going to be really apparent now. People are going to know that I'm triggered by this. So maybe just another good way could be that, you know, you have like a personal news that's, you know, with a disclaimer, you know, that this does contain news about maternity leave. You know, so just really kind of putting disclaimers on can be really helpful, and it can really acknowledge that this isn't just happening to a couple of people. So yeah, just trying to make that normalized.
What do you say to, or what's the best term or approach if parents push back and say, well, this is actually my good news, I want to share this, I have a right to share that I have a family, I want to talk about my children in the workplace. It makes the workplace more human. What's a good approach if someone's sat there and they're facing that, or they're feeling that might be something they're going to come up against? What's a good way to tackle that? Is there a good way to tackle that at all?
Yeah, it is really hard because there has been a push, hasn't there, recently to really kind of bring your personality to work and bring your identity, you know, be yourself and talk about things that are going on in your personal life. And it is really difficult because we do meet parents who want to talk about the difficulties they face being a parent and juggling work. And of course, that's understandable. You know, that must be really difficult. So it's kind of recognizing that, yes, you know, that's really hard, you know, for you to balance that, and you might want to bring that to talk about. However, it's not something that, you know, you should be bringing into, for example, a team meeting, you know, talking about things that aren't related to work. So, you know, if you're there talking about, I don't know, like going to your nativity play, or, you know, you have school photos put on your desk, you know, it's raising awareness that actually, while, you know, you want to sort of bring that to work, how that could be triggering for people who you don't even realize, you know, people who haven't said anything to you. Because I think that's the problem. Some people think, oh, well, if someone's struggling, I'd know about it. but they don't realise that actually, no, people often can't talk about it. I've never personally come across any parent that said, you know, I really want to talk about my children in work or whatever, but I think it's more implicit, isn't it? I don't know if you've come up against that yourself.
It's been an implicit thing. It's been if it's mentioned face to face, and it's sort of like a frown and and dismissed. The conversation just carries on anyway. I think one of the things that came up as well, actually, is a slight digression to this, is actually LinkedIn popped up quite a lot in that work webinar that we were doing. How do you handle LinkedIn? And I absolutely, totally, completely agree, because we were doing a lot around World Childless Week. So the Full Stop podcast is on LinkedIn. We have a page there that anyone can go and look at. And we shared a lot. And I was looking through the hashtag, and actually every single time I saw it as myself, not just as a full stop, but went in and just liked and supported where I saw the hashtag, because a lot of people were posting something that might have just been a share, or they may have actually said, look, this is me. And of course, it's the tumbleweed. And then that, you know, just the tumbleweed can make you think, oh, I really shouldn't have posted that. Sort of going through, look, you know, thank you on behalf of World Childless Week, as an ambassador for World Childless Week, thank you very much for sharing this. And here's the website for World Childless Week, and here's the Full Stop podcast. And you know, we're here. But I can do that because I've shared that story. But you know, LinkedIn is extremely hard at the moment, because it doesn't have any way of muting words that you may not want to see. And I've noticed that because of my Google habits, that obviously I'm looking up the Full Stop podcast is in itself somehow linked in Google's mind to pregnancy. And of course, then LinkedIn starts to bring up all the adverts, and it's just I've been stalked by some fertility solutions company on LinkedIn at the moment. But actually, my principal work in trade is as a designer. You know, I'd like to know more about some fonts, please, not about that. But it's that sort of behavior, I think, again, LinkedIn, the authenticity, and let's be ourselves. And so many people do this moral dictatorial bullshit about using their children on LinkedIn. Oh, my daughter has a paper round, and you know, she saves 3 pensioners and 1 granny, and you know, something. And you think, oh, for God's sake, please, you know, because actually, A, it's a trigger, B, it's probably completely made up, and it's just really tricky. And I find that I have to go in and just take a really deep breath and be in the right frame of mind for LinkedIn, in the way that I think I used to be with Twitter, until I learned that actually you can hide all these words. But LinkedIn currently doesn't offer that, and it's really tough, actually.
Yeah, definitely. It's difficult because there's no sort of easy solution that, you know, you can just kind of say this is what you need to do. But what we are trying to do is trying to tackle this kind of one organisation at a time, you know, and really try and get in there, and not just training managers, HR, but training organisation wide, and really trying to show, you know, where there may be triggers, where there may be discrimination that people hadn't noticed before. You know, we also do some training on, you know, kind of what to say and what not to say if someone discloses to you, because often people say, oh yes, I've had a disclosure, and I just didn't know what to say. I was lost for words. You know, no one's ever disclosed anything about, you know, the miscarriage to me ever. And you think, my goodness, because of how common this is, you know, we really need to equip managers with the tools to know what to say. And that's what we're trying to do, really, not just through kind of formal policy, but through training as well.
Yeah, my sister-in-law, I think I've said this story before, but I'm old. I'm not allowed to repeat myself. She had the occasion to meet a woman at her work who was childless, and she actually offered that to I think it's a group of 3 or 4 women, and so she offered that to the women. And don't get me wrong, my sister-in-law is the sweetest woman. But I said, what did you do next? because she actually does talk to me about this. So, so it's always good to chat with her. But anyway, she said, I said, what did you do next? She goes, change the subject. And I said, so just let me, as a manager of people, just let me put this from a different perspective to you. So there's this thing that this woman is holding deep inside, this grief that is just, can be, totally consuming at times. She has offered that to you, and you've changed the subject. Now, I know you changed the subject because you didn't know what to say, but think about how she now feels. And admittedly, my sister-in-law was devastated once I told her that. I mean, she felt absolutely shit. I said, imagine how that woman feels now. So you need, I can't remember exactly what I said to her, but I said, you need to recognise that, and you need to at least say, oh, I'm sorry, or something. And would you like to talk about it? I'd like to understand.
Yeah.
It's not difficult, is it? But it happens so often, actually. And I think there's that thing where you say something, and I know it happened to me at the beginning when I started to get that little bit of bravery and just say, look, actually, this is the thing. I've had miscarriages, or and this is my story, or just a little bit, a tiny, tiny little bit of something about me, and then no one responds, or people say, oh, I'm sorry, blah 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 blah, here's my children. And hang on, how am I meant to reframe this to you? How can you be so damn dismissive? Yeah. I think it's so incredibly hurtful, because it feels like you're being ignored or devalued, and it should never be like that. It's again disenfranchised grief. It makes me so angry on behalf of the listeners to this episode who are sitting there thinking, I tried, or I want to try, and are too scared to try. I'm angry for them that they don't have that platform, but equally so amazed and delighted and inspired by the fact that you are there, Katy, doing what you're doing. It's absolutely incredible, because it must be hard for you sometimes, surely.
Absolutely. When you do have the disclosures, it's because it's such emotive work. It can be difficult to hear, some people's stories and their experiences in work, and how they've been able to still go back in and still do their job. I just, I think it's amazing. But definitely, I think people feel almost, they say that they feel awkward. So, if somebody discloses, a loss, or, that they're going through fertility treatment, that they're struggling because their child is not by choice, they feel that they're not equipped with the tools to be able to support that person. And this isn't just managers, this is society-wide, isn't it? This can be your best friend, or even some people say, oh goodness, I disclosed to my own mum, who, said something really insensitive. And you do hear, and often it minimizes as well, because people might try and make you feel better. So in society, we're taught, aren't we, always trying to find a solution, like you were saying, but also we want people to feel good, and we want to take away any awkwardness. So if someone sort of says that to us, it's like, oh, well, at least, you still got time to try, or at least, you've got a nice partner. We hear that one. Or at least you can have a lie-in, which is the one we spoke about earlier. But but people, I think that they feel they don't have the tools to know what to say. So we actually do communication training, which we found a real positive reaction to that, because it's giving people more confidence when they do have a disclosure. Especially, they say, knowing what not to say, because often some people just want to be heard. They don't want a solution. They don't want you to make it better. They definitely don't want you to say, have you considered adoption? That just comes up time and time again. It's like, no, that's funny. I've never considered that, honestly. But yeah, it's trying to really educate and change one workplace at a time, really.
Amazing. Where do you see it going? So you mentioned you're doing a PhD. Where do you ultimately want to take it?
Yeah, so I do want to have an academic career. I do want to publish in this area. But importantly, to me, is to really put this into practice. Hence why I've set up MIST workshops. So I'd like to continually have, the most up-to-date research to share with organisations and to really make a practical change, because I think it's really important that this issue is tackled and addressed, and so that people aren't suffering in silence. Because if we have a miscarriage policy, if we have, a fertility policy, if we acknowledge childlessness, then it actually means that people will disclose more, and they'll be able to feel that this isn't just happening to me. So yeah, there's a real practical element to what I'm doing. So not just academic and just sat on the dusty shelf, really making practical changes.
Wow, it's amazing.
It's amazing, yeah.
You've been so inspiring today.
Yeah. That's why we were so quiet, wasn't it? It was all like
solutions.
Gripped.
There are solutions to this. I think that it's the first time that I've come away thinking there are solutions.
Yeah.
Because of what you're doing, Katy. It's incredible, because just to have, at least if nothing else, people can go to your website and they can say to somebody in HR, here's Katy, she does this, can we get her into our workplace?
Absolutely.
How amazing is that?
Yeah, that was actually one way we had we did help an organisation because someone put it to HR, and then HR contacted us, and we do put our webinars up there as well, so that organisations can listen to what we offer, and whilst it is a business, but the making money side of it isn't really what appeals to us at all. It's just trying to change the views. I mean, obviously you've got to pay your bills, but I do feel very passionate about it. So that's really important to us as well. It's about making change and raising awareness of the issues. So we do have very affordable prices, for organisations, and we also do tailored packages as well, because we want to work with organisations and understand what their individual needs are, if that makes sense. And they do vary. It's quite interesting. They do vary because so some companies will say to us, well, this doesn't affect us because we're male dominated, really, so I don't think that this is important, is it? And you think, oh goodness, this is so crucial for all workplaces to acknowledge.
And if nothing else, it means that people have the tools to go home and to do better, even if it's not colleagues. They may be a small company that they're not aware that this is a thing, or perhaps genuinely there actually isn't anybody within their company who at that point is childless not by choice, all going through some kind of childless journey, but they've got something they can take out into society and they can pass it on and go, actually, I went to this really brilliant workshop with Katy last week and I know what to say.
Yes.
I feel I am enabled, and that then just becomes like a kind of a roll of information. Someone starts somewhere and then it becomes bigger and knocking down, these triggers and these issues one by one.
Absolutely.
How incredible.
We one example we have, we work with a small company, and they just did not realise that they had done this, but one of their recruitment flyers that they put out, they didn't realise, they thought, oh, we're going to try and attract female talent because we're really lacking there. We're lacking having females in management, so let's try and appeal. So in the actual job advert, they talked about, oh, we have a 4-day week, and this is great for parents, but they actually put that in.
Oh God, I knew you were going to say something like that. It was just, oh God, it makes you just like, oh my God.
And it was so well intentioned. It was so well meant, because they thought, how can we attract women? But it was like, no, because actually this is creating segregation. This is actually discrimination. You're creating an us and them, and actually, whether they're a parent or not, it should not impact on whether they get the job or not, or whether the job appeals to them or not. The same privileges, the same rights. That's what we're really trying to help organisations with.
Wow.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant. There are podcast episodes, all of them, that I always think, wow, and this is another wow moment.
Thank you so much for having me, and giving this platform to Mist to talk about what we do. And thank you for everything you do for your own listeners as well, because I have had people say, oh yeah, I've seen that podcast, and isn't it amazing how they share their really emotive stories so openly, and it really gets people talking. So thank you for everything that you do, and for doing this, raising awareness and putting yourselves out there.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think if we can share something that just helps one person, I think that's it, isn't it? Really, I think that's true of everybody in in this area. As we, I don't know, with someone said, like a thought leaders, and I thought about thought. Anyone to lead my thoughts, but sure, Sarah and Michael will tell you. But
I'm not quite sure about that either, because when we were talking there about what do you do in an office if someone does that, I was thinking about a cattle prod or a room of 500 sheets of paper. So
the direct.
I kind of walked away from it all, and thought, no, okay, I'm not doing that. As Sarah and I both do other things as well. Yeah, but again, actually within that you find other triggers. They're just different triggers. Like I say, the whole sort of day with the freelance thing, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, and then you come away and think, oh, that's my problem. But think, no, actually, it's not. It really is not my damn problem. It's partly my problem because I've got the trigger, but actually, no, it's not. It's the way that actually society functions, and it's just wrong.
Yeah,
really
prenatalism.
Oh, it is.
What a challenge on all levels, but we can start with the workplace, and then
we can, can't we? Katy, if people want to find you, what's your website? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, so it's Mist Workshops, MIST, and we've got a website, and on there you can find my email address. But we're active on Twitter, share a lot on there, latest research and what we do. So we're at Mist Workshops on Twitter as well.
Lovely.
So do please get in touch anytime if we can help your organisation, especially, or if you're a manager and you want to be able to help, to be more inclusive, because this is a discrimination issue, and it's only going to become more and more of a bigger issue, I think, especially with tackling gender equalities and gender disparities.
Most definitely.
Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
Fascinating. Just out of curiosity, are you on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me under, obviously, my name, Katy Schnitzler. But I need to set up a page really for Mist Workshops.
We'll come and find you. Let's create some kind of powerhouse. One of the things actually I'm hoping that I can do is to set up a network of people who are freelance or business owners who are childless, not by choice, across all genders. Fantastic. So that actually we can be kind of a powerhouse. We can actually trade with each other if we wanted to, but also just have that support in place for us, because our situations are slightly different. I know Gateway Women have their change makers as well, so another place that people can look at if they want a bit more support. It's in part of their membership group, so you'd have to be a member, but they do have within Mighty Networks the Changemakers, and there's amazing stories coming out and a really nice place to share stuff. But what I'd quite like to do is set something up in the near future for freelancers and business owners, specifically them, as opposed to perhaps people being in employment.
Let me know if you need help with that. I'll be all.
The Full Stop podcasts are going to be roped in. Oh yeah.
Oh, no choice. Okay.
I think it's something that we actually probably need to. I think it's something that we can do, but I also think as well it's a subject that we need to return to again as a podcast, because it affects so many of our listeners and our demographic.
As Berenice just said, we will revisit this topic again, as it's such an important part of an inclusive workplace. We'll leave all of Katy's details in the show notes and in our newsletter that Berenice will craft with the release of this episode. We'd love to hear others' opinions on the podcast too, or you may have a suggestion on how to improve it. Or you might be looking to follow us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. And all these links and the contact details can be found on our website, www.thefullstoppod.com. Now, we would also appreciate if you could rate us on the platform you are using to listen to the podcast, because the more ratings we get, it means the algorithm will make us more visible and we can reach more of our community that are feeling that no one understands. We love hearing from our audience too, so please drop us a line at any time. And as always, it's important for us to let you know you are not alone.